So I finally was able to declutter my art desk even more. I think it looks it looks like I'm able to get to it. If you've seen the previous video, you saw that I couldn't even really get to my art desk. So thankfully I got most of that cleared away, and once I was able to do that, I sat down, and in the spirit of decluttering my house and especially my art space, I had this image in my mind that I wanted to create. And so I call it freeing up space, because that's what decluttering is. It's just freeing up space, not just in my home, but mentally it helps me as well. Physically it helps me not just, not being able to, like, not having to trip on things or walk around things, but also just feeling that sigh of relief, like, oh, I just don't have so much to do as much. I still have stuff I have to do, but yeah. So the decluttering process is going well. I'm still not done, but I feel like the house feels bigger, much more like home, and I'm really enjoying that freedom that I now have. So with this particular drawing, I was initially going to draw a bird, but this image kept popping in my head, and so I decided to just kind of roll with it instead. And I wanted to do a collage. I used scrapbook paper, I used my micron pens, I end up using some of my Copic markers as well. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. It didn't turn out exactly as I saw it in my head, but I feel like the majority of artists, at least the majority of artists that I know, they're kind of the same way. They have something that they visualize in their head, and you don't get it out on paper quite exactly like what you have in your head. But overall, I'm still happy with the piece. It was nice to be able to just sit down and spend about 45 minutes, I think is what I spent on this piece, and just get it out and play around with it and have fun. So I wasn't strict with myself. I was just more or less like, what happens when I do this? What happens when I do that? A lot of my pieces that I enjoy the most really are more intuitive. Like, well, what happens if I use this color instead of this? What happens? I feel like I'm being drawn to one particular art supply than another one, or another one that I would typically use. And so I just had a lot of fun working with this particular piece and getting that out of my head. Like I said, it had been there for a couple of days since I had been really diving into the decluttering process at home. At home, I still have to go through my books. I've gone through them a couple of times already, but I still have way too many. The book that I had read from the library talks about, the things that you have are containers. So like my bookshelf is a container. And if I can't stand my books up the right way and them all fit on that shelf, the purpose isn't to go out and buy another bookshelf. That means that the container I have too much stuff, so I need to pare down even more. And that's good. I'm just struggling with some things. The majority of stuff that I have left to go through, I do have a few fiction books, which I plan to read through those and then, kind of get rid of those. But the things that I'm struggling with really are my art books and my spiritual kind of books. So spiritual self-help, woo kind of stuff, psychology kind of stuff. These are very different. And some self-help books, these are just very different kinds of beasts for me that I struggle with. And so I've got to sit with that. I've got to kind of go through, figure out what I'm going to do with that. And in the book, she says to, clear out the container and then put back the stuff you absolutely love first. And this is the stuff that you would not get rid of. And then if there's room, then you can add the stuff that you're like, all right, I'll keep it. And then, whatever's left, you get rid of, whether you donate it, you put it in the trash, recycle it, whatever. And I'm really struggling with that piece. Books are hard for me. Books are hard for a lot of people, though, so at least I'm not alone. Solidarity in that. Anyway, there's a few times in here, I didn't speed this video up only because I thought that I just wanted to share it. It's been a while since I've posted an art video, and I wanted to share that. The last video I posted, like I said, was some of my decluttering process, as well as my new tarot deck that I have that I am enjoying going through and really just getting to know these particular cards. I did have a really good experience with the Goddess Love Oracle deck that I had bought that I told you about. When I got it home, I realized that the book was missing several pages, and I reached out to the publishing company, and they sent me a new book. They actually sent me a whole new deck, which was a nice little pleasant surprise. So I'm happy about that, but the new book is complete. It's got everything in there, so I'm really excited about that as well. I do plan to do some more card readings on my channel. For the moment though, I have some other things that I need to focus on. I normally try to record on a Sunday when my husband can take the children. I'm not working, he's not working, and he can take the children and I can have some quiet time to record. That doesn't always work, and here and to the foregoing future though, that's probably not going to be what happens for a little while, only because I got some really good news from my allergy doctor yesterday. And so I'm going to be introducing nuts, peanuts, and tomatoes and stuff back into my diet, my daily kind of intake of food, and see how that goes. And so I thankfully get to do this at home with my husband, but my husband has to be here just in case something goes wrong. I did get offered the option to do it in the office, but honestly, when I just go to that office, I noticed yesterday just sitting in the waiting room like I was having an anxiety attack. So I would rather not go in there knowing that I'm going to eat something that, like, previously I've had, been told that I have an allergy to stay away from and like panic in that doctor's office. So, but for the whole backstory, I had been tested years ago in Mississippi when we lived there, and I was told that tomatoes, pine nuts, and almonds, that I was allergic to those things, and though I needed to stay away from those things completely, including all nuts. And it was through a skin test. I had not been having I guess what would be a typical allergic reaction, like a rash or anything like that. At the time I was sick, they were trying to figure out what was happening, so allergies were a thought to check. But what would happen is occasionally my heart rate would start racing. I would feel like I was going to pass out. I would feel like I couldn't breathe. All things now that they are pointing to years and years later, saying this really does sound just like panic and anxiety attacks. So, but at the beginning, nobody was considering that it could be just that. And so I ended up with several doctors. Thankfully, though, during that process, they did find that, I had cancer. And if you followed my journey, you know that that's not an issue anymore. Thank the Lord for that. But the tomatoes and the nuts, I was told to stay away from all nuts. And I've done that. My diet, I guess you would call it, was very restricted, extremely restricted in what I could technically eat. And I really do feel so bad for people that have these allergies, and because it changes a lot. You have to read labels, you got to be careful if you even go out to eat. And a lot of our culture is, you meet up with someone and what do? You go out to eat, or you have dinner together and cookouts and stuff like that. And when you have food allergies, like, that's really hard to do those things and be social, because a big part of our social lives involves eating together. But anyway, coming back to it, I stayed away from those things. And when we moved up here, I occasionally would have these episodes, and so I decided to try an allergy specialist up here. And when I went to her and I told her what was going on, the tests they did or whatnot, she felt pretty confident that I was given some bad information. But it had been years at this point with those things not being in my diet, so I had to slowly start adding stuff in, and I've been doing great. Able to eat sunflower seeds. I eat egg rolls a lot now, probably more than what I should, but they're good, so don't judge me there. Popcorn, shrimp, just all kind of stuff. So these delicious things that I used to take for granted, and now I can add them back into my life. Now, I do hit moments where I overdo it and my stomach will hurt, but I'm still trying to balance that out. It's easy to, when you've had a very restricted, limited diet, when you can add something in, it's a little easy to go overboard with it. So I have to be careful with that. But she did a blood test, and the interesting thing about the nuts, this time, instead of the nuts showing as a pine nut and an almond allergy, it came up as a peanut, and every other nut was perfectly fine. So she feels pretty confident that that's not going to be an issue. And then the tomato, and it was low grade. The peanuts, I forget what she said, but like in her world, like that wasn't even really significant. And she does this every day for a living. And then the tomatoes was kind of the same way. It was just a couple of, I guess, numbers higher, but it wasn't anything she was concerned about. So much to the point that, like I said, she gave me the option. I can either try it at the doctor's office with her if that would make me feel more comfortable, or I could do it at home. Just make sure that I do it around earlier in the day, like before lunch or right at lunch, when I try the food, and make sure that my husband is around. So the idea of being able to eat tomatoes again and pizza, I'm not gonna lie, like when I say tomatoes, I'm predominantly meaning pizza. But the idea of being able to do that again is wonderful, but at the same time it is kind of scary. She asked me if I would like an EpiPen and told me I didn't have to have one, but she asked me if I wanted one, and my first response was no. Like, I'm afraid that like I'm gonna eat, a tomato or something, have a panic attack, and then like, shoot myself with an EpiPen because I'm freaking out or something. So this is what it's like. This is what it's like living with a ridiculous, like, high level of anxiety and fear, especially around my food. And that has been probably the hardest part of this whole journey over the past few years. Don't get me wrong, the cancer part was scary. Having sarcoma was scary. Going through that and like not knowing if it was going to come back, and knowing that, according to them, that if it came back, like it was going to be terrible. It's going to aggressively attack my lungs, and, the outlook isn't so good. Like, those things were scary. But living every day in fear of the food that I eat, not being able to socialize the way that I was used to, having to change everything about my life, not really going out anymore, in the small occasions that I did, being afraid, of what these people were feeding me. Even though I said, like, hey, keep it away from tomatoes, there's a tomato allergy. There was one place that handed me a burger with ketchup, and I'm just like, I said, keep it away from tomatoes, like there's a tomato allergy. And they're like, oh, well, you didn't say ketchup. And it's just like, oh, wow. And you don't really think about this if you don't have food allergies or know someone with food allergies. It doesn't really register. But if I would have been into that, like, well, according to my new doctor, nothing would happen. But the whole point is that I don't really know. I don't know yet because I haven't tried it. So all of this is to say that on Sundays, I'm probably not going to be recording the way that I want to. I'm probably going to have to start doing that during the week when the kids and I are not homeschooling and I'm not cleaning and doing other things. So, but I still plan to do it, and this will be a new little challenge. See if my kids can be quiet long enough for me to actually record a video. But with all of this, as you can tell from this video, from last video, from my conversation with you here, is that this has been a very long journey and process for me. And this decluttering part is finally that part where I'm saying I have to let go of the things that aren't serving me anymore. I have to let go of the things that make me feel restricted. I have to free up some space, and that has to be in all areas, including mentally as well. And so it's going to be interesting trying to declutter this fear and these thoughts about what will happen when I eat certain foods. And it wasn't just tomatoes and nuts that I was told to stay away from and then started staying away from. Like I said, my food became very limited. And so it's going to be very interesting getting past that. Just a few weeks ago, well, I guess maybe a few months ago now, I had tried salmon, and that had been the first time in a very, very, very long time, many, many years. And I tried just a little bite, and the first couple of times, I did panic. I didn't have a reaction, but I panicked and my heart would race and all that stuff. And so it's going to be interesting, even adding in normal foods. Like I know this weekend, like I'm searching for a recipe that has garlic in it, because garlic, like I've been staying away from all kinds of stuff that just back in the day, like if I didn't feel good after I ate, like I stayed away from it out of fear. And so it's going to be interesting decluttering these fears and freeing my mind and my body of those. So that's going to be very interesting journey, but it is a process, much like the house. I'm not going to get it all done in one day, and that's okay. The point is I'm taking steps towards that. So while I'm not ready just yet on a Sunday to bite into my first slice of pizza in 6 or 7 years, whatever it's been now, I'm going to start with foods that I used to love and like cut out because one reason or another. But essentially it boils down to being afraid. And my whole thought process coming back into this is that I don't want to go back to eating junk food or eating a bunch of fast food. I will occasionally eat out, but I want to try new foods. When I do, I want to try good foods, and I want to really learn how to enjoy cooking and cooking new and interesting recipes, things that my previous self would not have eaten, things that my previous self would not have even attempted to cook. I want to branch out. I want to try new things. And there was this book years ago when I was in yoga teacher training, and it was a book on Ayurvedic cooking, and I want to look into getting that book and kind of going through that and tasting some of these foods and trying out, the different foods based off of your dosha. If you don't know what that is, it's probably best if you just start going and looking up your doshas in Ayurveda. And it's very interesting, even down to, how you can live your day. It's not even just your food, it's what's best nurturing for your dosha, your type, your constitution. And so I just want to experiment, and I want to try new things and branch out and see what happens. Speaking of what happens, in the moment, this particular moment in the video, I'm using this gold pen, and I have to say I absolutely love that pen. I was actually kind of thinking when I got it I would never use it, maybe just a little bit here and there, but it's actually ended up being one of my most favorite pens that I have. I just had to share that with you. But I was putting little gold kind of dots and little lines around her head, just kind of helping her shine, freeing up that space. So that is what this video is about, is just all about me freeing up space. And that's what my art in this particular art piece is about, is freeing up space. Almost like this celebration, just kind of letting things go. There's a couple of times here where I work on her lips and I'm trying to get them where I like them. At the beginning stage, I did something that I liked, and then I just kept messing with it and wasn't exactly impressed. But at the end, I liked the way it turned out. It wasn't terrible. One of the things that I've recently enjoyed with my art is adding in paper, the scrapbook paper, that kind of thing. I like having that ability to add in these patterns and this color, a little bit of texture as well, to my pieces. And I really am drawn to artists like Wendy Andrew, artists like, I'm trying to remember her name, Jane Davenport is one of them that does it, but there's Tamara Laporte does some faces of women and stuff like that, but there's another artist, Kelly Ray Roberts, I do believe is her name, and I absolutely adore her work. I think it is gorgeous, it is encouraging, it's a lot of fun, and so I've been enjoying some of that, so much to the point where she actually has a calendar, and I bought myself the little pocket calendar that she has with the art on it. And I've noticed that, you know, not only does she do the faces and the inspirational words, but it looks like in some of her pieces sometimes she does do collage kind of style with scrapbook papers and, you know, things like that. And if you followed my work for a while, you know that sometimes that creeps in, even before that would creep into my work. The one painting that my husband fell in love with had scrapbook paper on it, even napkins with birds like on it, and it's a pretty large canvas. It's over on my Instagram, and what I did with that piece is if you've followed some of my other stuff, you know that when I work in my mixed media books, my art books, that kind of stuff, sometimes I'll stabilo the edges. So I'll take my black stabilo pencil and smudge the edges, and it kind of gives it this really cool, not really burnt, but kind of burnt look to it. And so that's what I actually did with the paint on that canvas, and I thought it looked really neat. But it reminds me though almost of backgrounds, like for some of these artists that do the work that I like, it kind of reminds me of the backgrounds, because they usually end up putting a face and some encouraging words, or they might put a bird and some encouraging words, like that kind of thing. Another artist that I do tend to like because of her mixed media style, and she uses paper, she uses everything under the sun. Like if she can put her fingers on it and it can fit, like she's going to figure out a way to make it fit into her art. And that is Lori Marie Jenkins. Yes, Lori Marie Jenkins. She's a YouTube artist. I absolutely adore her stuff. I've been following her for years now, and she's just a lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to see her process. I love the way she thinks. I like how fun she makes it and free, and I like how her art tells a story without really having to tell a story. Her stuff, when you look at it, you see the deeper meaning. You see and feel what's behind it. You don't have to have words. Sometimes she'll put words on her stuff, but you don't, like, it might only be like one word. You know, you don't even need more than that, really. And you a lot of times you don't even need that word, because you can just see it, you can feel it. And so I really like her stuff as well. I do follow a few artists on YouTube. I don't watch the stuff of all of them, but she is one that I find myself at least once or twice every 6 months kind of watching some of her stuff and enjoying it. One of the things that I noticed while working on this piece is that when I Mod Podged what is her dress down, a little bit of the glue got on the edges around it. And if you notice, if you look at it, you can kind of tell a little bit at her arms where I used the marker to color her arms, but definitely over at her ankles, you can tell that the paper doesn't take up the marker because there's glue there. And so there's kind of a blotchiness to her skin. I could have used paint to cover that up, but honestly, I like it. I like it the way that it is. I don't feel the need to change that. It really actually reminds me of this. I have a cousin and an aunt that have these patches of lighter spots on their skin. My one aunt has it on her left thigh, and I actually have the exact same marking. It's got these weird edges. It's the same size on my thigh that she has on hers. And then I have a different cousin who has several of these lighter patches. So that's kind of what it made me think of, and so I kept it. I did want to add some kind of background, but since the piece was about freeing up space, I did not want to clutter it up. And so I wanted it to be this vague background where, like, you kind of know, like, there's some trees and stuff in the back, but they're not really the focus of the piece, and I didn't want them to be too distracting, and I didn't want them to be closer to her. So they're kind of moved further back, or at least that's the appearance that I tried to give them. So they're broken, the broken lines, they're not complete lines, and they're further back. And so it was just kind of this hazy little piece so that you know that there's stuff back there. So she's kind of more in this open area. And the interesting thing is that the only thing I could think of to do with the background, because I didn't want to leave it in ink, I felt like it needed color. The only thing I could do was take out my watercolors. And so I end up using my watercolors to kind of paint over the background. And I was really drawn to the yellow. No surprise though, because yellow is one of my favorite colors. My top favorite. Every shade of yellow I pretty much enjoy. I used to fully believe and tell you that my favorite color was blue. At one point it was green, but the majority of my life was blue. But after I got into doing art, painting, and I was looking at all the various shades of different colors, the hues and all that stuff, the tones, every bit of it, I realized that yellow was the only color that I liked every single version of. When it came to blue, there's certain blues that I am absolutely repulsed by. I do not like them whatsoever. And so I decided at that moment that yellow was technically my favorite color, because you could give me any shade of yellow and I will like it. Whereas the blue, there's only a few shades of blue that I actually truly enjoy. And that tends to be more of like a navy, that kind of thing. So I do like the peacock kind of blue. I think that's pretty, kind of those colors. And then some of the blue greens, like more shading, that kind of thing. But yeah, and then every shade of green I'm not a fan of. I do not like hunter green. It's too dark, it's too heavy for me. I don't like baby blue. I used to like baby blue, but I don't know, it's a little too much for me now. So yeah, along with some other stuff, but you get the point. So yellow is my favorite color. That is partially why yellow ended up being the background. Plus, you know, I thought it would look good with the blue and the green. Anyway, so I use I'm pretty sure it's my Winsor Newton color palette to paint the back yellow. Initially, when I had envisioned this, since I'm talking about this piece and I'm talking about how differently it turned out compared to what was in my head. So initially, when I would envision the piece, there was no background. She had her arms out just like that with the palms up, so her hands are cupped. And there's this collage paper kind of sun above her, directly above her head, and she's looking up. I'm not fully confident in my ability to paint / draw a face and it looking up, so I need to work on that. So that's why, honestly, if you looked at the beginning of the video, the drawing, light little sketch I did, was of the face looking up. And if you looked at it, you saw that it looked messed up. But anyway, that's why her face ended up being, you know, kind of head on. It's because I just was not comfortable yet with trying to do that. I would like more practice doing that before I start putting that in this particular sketchbook. If you've noticed, this sketchbook is predominantly me doing kind of more collage, kind of scrapbook paper kind of art. There's my Winsor Newton palette, and so that's what I use. I have yet to use that cute little brush that's in there. Instead, I opted to get my paintbrush that has the water. It holds the water. It's like a water paintbrush, but it holds the water inside the body of the brush. And so that is actually what I end up using. And so I end up just mixing the yellow with my white, and that's what I got. Okay, so at this point I'm kind of filling in some of the spaces with the yellow. I'm going to also go over some of the spaces I've already painted just to kind of help darken them up as if a shadow's there. So further in the back, the trunks of the trees, little spots on the house, that kind of thing. Now, if you are used to watching my videos, you may have noticed that I'm talking quite a bit in this particular video. A lot more than usual. And there are good reasons for that, but the main one is because I know for a fact that while my husband is driving home from work, he will occasionally put on one of my videos and listen to it. And if there's a lot of space, dead silence, I know he's driving, I don't want him looking at my video, so this way I'm talking, so he can hear my voice and he can hear exactly what this video is about and not having to try to look. So I do appreciate that very much. So that is why I'm talking so much in this one, is because I know that he listens to it. And I do know that there are a couple of people that they will listen as well, not necessarily watch the full video, but listen. I know for me, I will be completely honest, it's really hard for me to watch a full-length process video like this. My mind goes 90 to nothing, if you haven't caught that already with my anxiety. And I can watch stuff like this and I will be distracted, like, ooh, I should do this. Ooh, I should draw this. Ooh, I should probably be doing this instead. And so yeah, it's actually really hard for me to sit down and watch stuff like this. However, I have been training myself with these videos to sit down and watch them and edit them, and it hurts. Not gonna lie, and some days it's really hard, but I've been training myself to get in the habit of doing those things. It has nothing to do with the video itself. I struggle even watching other artists that do real-time videos like this. If it isn't basically like a 90s cartoon where like it's 5 seconds and it's just like flashing through like 80 different scenes and then onto a commercial and then back to the 101 scenes this time, I have a hard time paying attention to it. I have a hard time focusing on it. This is one of the reasons why I actually enjoy doing art. Like I said, this page right here took me about 45 minutes. 45 minutes of me being completely focused on what I was doing, and that is a lovely thing. I think I lean more towards my sketches, doing those as well, the way that I've been doing them, because it's about 45 minutes to an hour of me just really, really focused on the present moment, focused on what I'm looking at, my subject, and drawing. So it's teaching me to slow down and pay attention, to be fully in the present moment. And that's a good thing. I really enjoy that. It teaches me that a lot better than yoga and meditation have. I like yoga and meditation. I still like those things, even though I don't have a yoga studio anymore. But it helps me in a different way, I guess. So with art, I've learned to slow down. I've learned to listen to my intuition. I've learned to accept things that I can't change. I've learned to acknowledge the things that I can and then decide whether or not I really want to change those things. I've learned to loosen up, not be such a perfectionist. I've learned to enjoy the mess of it. I've learned a lot actually by learning to do art and just kind of having fun with it. I've also learned that making art for me is a very personal journey, and I love sharing that with y'all. I love sharing the things that I make, because sometimes I make stuff and I'm like, oh, this looks amazing and I'm proud of it. And yeah, there's also a lot of stuff that I make and I'm like, oh, I cannot show that. That looks not so great. But I guess my whole point is there's also things that I've made that I love, and I also feel like I can't share because it's a little too intimate, simply because like it's in my, daily art journal where I was sketching things of my day and I would write some stuff too. But my point is that I like sharing it. But through that process of sharing it, I have also learned that I don't really want to turn my art into a quote-unquote business. It's just not something that I feel called to do right now. I did sell a couple of like my paintings. I sold a large canvas. I've, sold some of my digital art, those kind of things. But I'm not really feeling that, because I don't want that kind of pressure and that stress over something that is really just a personal journey for myself to get into a deeper conversation with myself. And so I like to share it. I like to show you what I'm working on. I know that I'm not everyone's cup of tea when it comes to being an artist. I know not everyone likes my style. I'm still playing around with a lot of different ways to, decide what I like in this particular moment, knowing that 10, 20, 30 years from now, that can be completely different. I'm using it as a tool to explore myself. And that's what draws me to it and keeps me coming back to it. And if I put that pressure on it, that like, oh, I gotta make stuff that sells, oh, I need to turn this into a business, that's just not for me. That's not in my cards right now. So at this point, you see, I am writing the date. And so I unfortunately can't see it because my little recording block is in the way. So today is actually September 24th on a Friday, so whatever day that was that I drew that, it's been that many days since I've edited the video. Anyway, so back to my conversation. I know that I'd mentioned in videos a while back that I had wanted to, by September or October, open up my webpage, and I had a really beautiful one that I was working on, and I'm proud of it because that was like an art in itself, especially with patience. However, I'm not going to be open up my page to sell my art. That's not what it's there for. If someone is absolutely just drawn to something I made and they're like, ooh, I might consider it. I have turned down a couple of people on a couple of pages that I've made in this particular book that I did not want to cut out or even make a copy of and sell. So that's just not on my agenda. My agenda is to really come to my art desk when I'm ready to explore and to play and to heal. And that's what I'm going through. That's what everything is going to be about. So you will be seeing the changes on my channel. Most of you have already seen that the title of my channel has changed. It is now Everyday April. And I'm enjoying that. I've also shared a lot more of the other things that I enjoy, like my cards. You'll probably see me share a lot more of other things like hiking and stuff like that, and my decluttering process. And so this is really just another creative outlet for me to process and share my journey. I just want to thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. And if you've made it to the end, I cannot explain how much that really does mean to me. I truly, truly, truly appreciate you being here. I will see you next time. Bye.